this video, we'll be building 3 practical projects using different AWS services. And by building these projects, you will be learning a very important tool called AWS Amplify. So the first project will be a simple dashboard application. Based on the company department, user will be able to see different dashboard. On the second project, we will create a serverless contact form to collect email addresses, right? On someone is submitting, you will receive a real-time notification. On the third app, we will create a complete voting or polling application. Anyone will be able to create a poll and share the poll link with their audience to collect the responses. After completing these projects, you will have a solid understanding about AWS Amplify, and you will be able to put these projects in your portfolio as well. And the main thing is you need zero AWS experience to go through this. And all the sections are marked as chapters, so you can skip any section if you want. But I would suggest not to skip anything. Before starting with the projects, let's understand our tool and set up our local system for development. Alright, so these are all the services we'll be using to create these applications, right? Now, you can see it's quite a lot, and maybe we'll be using some other services that I'm not listing here. But if you want to build a simple web application, you cannot just use a single service, right? You need multiple services to do that. And for your application, these services are interconnected as well. Let's say from the Lambda function, you are creating a user inside Cognito. These kind of things, right? So you have to know a lot about these services to create a simple web application maybe. So to solve these problems, AWS has introduced a new service called AWS Amplify, right? So with this AWS Amplify, it's kind of an abstraction layer. So you don't have to understand all these underlying services. So if I give you an example, let's say you want to host your React application, okay? So you will just publish a simple command to AWS Amplify that I want to host my React app maybe, and you will hand over the build output for your application, right? And under the hood, AWS Amplify will set up everything for you, all the services. Okay, it will create these services and configure these services according to your command. So for hosting the React app, it will create an S3 bucket, it will create an CloudFront for CDN, right? So if I give you a second example, let's say you want to create a GraphQL API for your application. Okay, you publish this command to AWS Amplify, and AWS Amplify will create the necessary services for you. So AppSync, DynamoDB, and if any other services is required, it will create that for you as well. So this is the main purpose of AWS Amplify. It is basically abstracting some complexity, underlying service complexity from you. And if you already know these services, then also it will tremendously help you to reduce time. Like it will take you time to configure all these services one by one, right? And AWS Amplify will help you with that. So for quick prototyping and for fast development, AWS Amplify is a very, very useful tool. All right, so let's take this example. Let's say you want to create a REST API, right? So to do that, you have to install a tool in your system that is called Amplify CLI. So this is a command line tool, right? So with this command line interface, you will be able to publish different commands. So to create an API, you will publish a command like Amplify add API, and it will create and configure the necessary backend services. Now from your front end, you will be accessing these services, right? So to help you with this process, Amplify has a separate component that is called Amplify library, right? So with the Amplify library, whatever resources you are creating with this CLI, you will be able to talk to those resources from your front end, right? So that is Amplify library. And finally, Amplify has some pre-built UI components. So that is coming under Amplify UI component. So that is basically, let's say you are having a React application, and you can use some pre-built sign up, sign in form or upload button to upload files into S3 maybe. Okay, so those kind of pre-built UI components you can use in your front-end framework, right? So this is the main 3 section of Amplify. First, the Amplify CLI to create and configure all the resources, and Amplify library to talk to those resources from your front end. And finally, if you want, you can use some pre-built UI components from Amplify as well, right? So this is the main concept of Amplify. Under Amplify, we are having these 3 main sections, and Amplify CLI is the main one. All right, so on the Google, let's just search for Amplify documentation, and you can go to the first link. and select this generation 1. There's a generation 2, but first let's understand generation 1. Okay, and the latest version 6 is fine. So this is the main documentation page for Amplify, and I would highly recommend you bookmark this, right? So you can see I have a bookmark for everything related to AWS, right? And I have bookmarked this Amplify documentation as well. So in this documentation, if you click on this get started, it will first take you to this introduction page, right? And if you want to understand the concept of Amplify, like how things are working, then you can read it out. And it will give you a basic introduction, right? And the second step is set up the Amplify CLI. That Amplify CLI we were talking about, right? This part, Amplify CLI. So these are the requirements. So first thing, if you are going with npm, then you can just run this command on your system, npm install, and you are install it globally at AWS Amplify /CLI. So you can install this on your system. So once you install AWS Amplify, you can open a terminal window, and if you just type amplify-v, that will give you the version for that Amplify. All right, so I am on a version 12.10.3. All right, so next we have to configure this Amplify CLI, right? So just type amplify configure, hit enter, and it will open a new browser window, and it will take you to the AWS console, right? So let me quickly sign in, and I'm assuming you have an AWS account ready. If you do not have an AWS account, you can go through this playlist, and it will guide you how to create one from scratch. Okay, so now it has opened your AWS console. Go back to the terminal, hit enter. Okay, now you have to specify the region you want. You can change this configuration later, but for now, let us just choose for my closest region, that is app south 1. Okay, hit enter. So it is asking you to create a new user for this Amplify CLI. So with the credential of this user, Amplify CLI will talk to your AWS account, right? So let me add the username, maybe YouTube test user. Okay, and hit next. And now it is asking us to add some permissions to this user. Go back to the Amplify CLI. So they are having some screenshot. You can follow this as well if you want. So next in the permission, we have to attach some policies directly. So let's click on this one, and then we have to search for this one, administrator access Amplify. So let me just type Amplify here. So administrator access Amplify. So let's select this one, and yeah, we can hit next and create user. So it has created a new user called YouTube test user. Let me go back to the documentation. So we have to select this user. Perfect. Next, go to security credentials, and we have to generate a new access key. So create access key. You can choose the first one, command line interface. So command line interface, I understand. Hit next. We don't need any tag. Create access key. Okay, so now you have created the access key successfully. So you can see these are the access key. Okay, so if you want, you can click on this download as a CSV file. By the way, this screen will be visible for a single time, right? If you close this, then you have to generate the access key and secret access key again. So let me copy the access key. Let me go back to the terminal, hit enter. So it is asking me for that access key. I'm pasting that, hit enter, and let me copy the secret access key again. Okay, let me paste it here. So in your machine, you can have multiple AWS profile, right? So let me call it YouTube test again. So it's not mandatory that your username and the profile name must be similar. So this is just for you to identify this profile in your system. Okay, so YouTube test is fine. Hit enter. So you have successfully set up the AWS Amplify CLI. All right, now that we have installed and configured Amplify properly, let us set up a new Fullstack project. Okay, if you want, you can follow the documentation as well. So let's do one thing. Let me go to the documentation for Vite. Okay, and we will be create a simple React application. If you want, you can just go with any like vanilla JavaScript app or any other application as well. The methods will be similar. So let's copy the command npm create Vite latest, and let's call it simple React app. or simple Amplify app maybe. Okay, and let me just choose React. So these things are nothing to do with Amplify. I'm just setting up a new with React app, right? If you want, you can just create this React app with create React app. So let me choose JavaScript, cd into simple Amplify app, and run Amplify install. Let me first forward this installation process. Let us open our code editor here. Perfect. So we have created a simple React application. Okay. Now inside my VS Code, I have opened my terminal window on the root level. Right now, to initialize a new Amplify project, you just have to type Amplify in it. It is asking you for the project name. Whatever default is, that is fine for us. If you want, you can give it a nice name. So simple Amplify app is fine. So it is taking all the necessary defaults. Okay. In Amplify, you can have different development environment. So by default, it is taking dev and VS Code, app type, JavaScript, framework, React, directory path, everything it is picking up properly, right? Now there's one problem. This distribution directory path, it is taking build. Okay, but if you are using a Vite project, then the distribution directory path will be dist, not build. Okay, so we are not happy with the configuration. Hit N, and let's go through one by one. So React source directory src fine, but this will be dist, and rest of the things are fine. Now you have to choose an authentication process. Okay, so in the previous step we have created that AWS profile. So let us select this AWS profile, and from that you can see this YouTube test. If you have any other profile in your system, that will be listed here. Okay, so I'm just choosing YouTube test, and now it is setting up the application in the AWS backend. So let me first forward this as well. All right, so it has initialized the project, and it's just asking you to share some non-sensitive information with the backend team. If you want, you can share that. I'm just choosing no. All right, so initialization has been completed. Okay, now if I show you here, you can see it has created a new directory called Amplify, right? In that directory, you are having tons of files. And if you open this git ignore, inside the git ignore, it has like added a couple of files as well. So you should not commit these files into your source control system. Okay, so in the Amplify directory, this is the main folder, this backend folder. So if you add any services, let's say you are adding a storage services, you want to store media, so then there will be a storage service here. Okay, you are adding authentication services, so that will have its own folder here. All right, and rest of the things you can just ignore for now. We will be learning it later. Okay, so this is our simple React application, and we have initialized an Amplify project in it. And by initialization means it has created a new folder, and on our AWS backend, it has created a new project. So let me show you that project as well. So if I open my browser, and I'm on my AWS console, search for Amplify, go to AWS Amplify. Okay, and this is that application, simple Amplify app. All right, so if you add any services, all the backends will be listed here. All right, so to give you a feel of what Amplify can do, let us try to host this application. So we are having a simple app.jsx component. Let me remove everything from here, and let me just return a simple div called hello from Amplify. Okay, and let us run this on a local system. So npm run dev. Let's open a new tab, and let's go to localhost clone 5173. So yeah, we are getting hello from Amplify. Now it is running on our localhost. So we want to publish this application to the cloud. Okay, so to do that, what you have to do is you just have to type Amplify add hosting. Now it is giving you some options. So the first one is hosting with Amplify console, and this is the default one, and we are happy with that. If you want, you can opt in for Git-based deployment, but for now, let us go with manual deployment. Okay, so what it did is it has created a new directory inside this backend folder called hosting, right? And it has created all the necessary configuration that is needed on AWS for hosting. Okay, but it did not push any changes to the cloud. It just added a couple of configuration file on your local system, right? And you don't have to worry about these files, like whatever that is present, that is auto generated. Okay, Now to publish these changes to the backend, you just have to type amplify publish. Okay, so it is showing you all the changes. So you have added this hosting, okay, hosting category, and it will create that hosting. So yeah, hit yes. Now at the beginning you have added those options, right? What will be the disk directory, what is the build command. So it will use those commands to build your application, and it will ship your application to AWS cloud. And finally you will get a simple URL to talk to your application. So you can see it is building everything. All right, deployment is done. It has given you a simple URL with HTTPS. Okay, let's copy this. Let me head over to my browser, and if I paste this URL here, you can see I'm getting this React application. If I go back to my Amplify console now, hit refresh. So this was our simple app. There should be a new, yeah. So you can see this is the domain it has created. If you want, you can change the domain from here as well. If you have a custom domain, you can add it. So this is the power of Amplify, right? Now let's say you want to change something. So instead of Amplify, okay, you want to make it hello from React. So what you have to do is just type this command amplify publish again, and it will go through the same process. It will first build your project, zip up everything, and it will send everything to the cloud. Yeah, so hit Y. Now let's go back to our production build. If I hit refresh, you can see I'm getting hello from React. So as simple as that. Now to delete this application, you just have to type amplify delete, and it will delete all the resources from the backend, and it will delete all these files from your local system as well. So it might take few minutes to get completed. All right, so it has successfully deleted the project from everywhere. If I go back to that particular URL, hit refresh, you can see I'm getting a 404. Okay, and in the console as well, if I hit refresh, or let me go to the all apps section, you can see we're not having that particular application. Alright, so for any Amplify project, this is the process you will be following. To initialize the Fullstack project, you will be running Amplify init, and that will initialize an Amplify project for you, right? And it will create a new Amplify directory in your project, right? Like where you are running this Amplify init command. And in that Amplify directory, the CLI will add all the services you are adding, or all the categories you are adding. Now, after running Amplify init, to add any kind of categories, you are running these kind of commands like Amplify add API. So this add part is basically the action. So there are many kind of actions that you can perform with Amplify, like add, push, publish, delete. Okay, and finally you are just mentioning the category type, that I want a API category, or I want a storage category, I want authentication category, like that. Okay, now when you are running Amplify add API, it will just add that category or add that configuration files in your local system. Okay, so on that Amplify directory, it will add an API folder, and inside that folder you will be having all the configuration related to that API. Right now you have to run Amplify push API to actually create all these resources that you need for this API. Okay, so when you are running Amplify push API, Amplify will take all the configuration from your local system, and it will create or configure the necessary resources in the cloud. Okay, and finally, if you want, you can run Amplify update API, and if you want to change anything in the existing resources, then you can do that. And once you run Amplify update API, that will also just update in the local, right? And finally, you have to run Amplify push API again to update the resources. Okay, so basically whenever you are running any command with Amplify, it will first change the configuration that is present on your local system, and by running Amplify push, or there's another command called publish. So push and publish will only update the resources in the cloud. Okay, so this is the pattern you will follow to create any Amplify project, or to add any resources, to update any resources. Yeah, and finally, if you want to delete anything, you can just change the action to delete, and it will delete those resources as well. All right, so let's say we are having an organization, and inside the organization there are multiple departments. Okay, sales, marketing, admin, and for each of the department we are having a different kind of console, web console. So if anyone from the marketing department is logging in, then he will see something related to marketing. Okay, if someone from the admin department is logging in, he will see admin related stuff. Okay, similar for sales. So we will try to implement these with the help of AWS resources and AWS Amplify. So let us initialize a new React project with npm create with latest, and let us call it company console. All right, we want to use React, and and JavaScript is fine. Okay, cd into company console, and let us install all the dependencies. All right, the installation has been done. So let me open our code editor, and it's a typical React application, right? Let us run this quickly, and let's see, like in the local host, what are we getting? So it's a v8 React application. Okay, so let me remove everything inside the app. Let me just return a simple div, right? And inside index.css, we don't need anything, and we can delete the app.css if you want. Right, we are not bringing this. Perfect. Now we are just getting hello here. So let me create a new components directory, and inside the components we'll be having our first component, that is the dashboard component. So these are some simple React stuff, right? All right, now inside the dashboard we are expecting an array of group. So there will be some sort of a user, and on that particular user there will be different kind of groups. So let's say for a particular user in the group, they are having this kind of things. So admin, and they're also part of maybe sales. Okay, and some users are part of this group, so just the marketing maybe. All right, and some users are like this. You got the idea. Okay, so this will be the group attribute for that particular user, and a single user can be part of multiple groups. That's why we are using an array, right? And with that array, like whatever groups that user belongs to, we'll be including that groups here. This is the plan. Now we didn't initialize our backend yet, but let's hard code the data. So let's say we are just getting the group like this, and based on the group we want to do it like this. Let's say if group includes admin, then we want to return, oh, this is not happy. Okay, React prop types. So there's some ESLint validation error. Let me turn this off. These are some weird stuff. Let's not worry about this. Right, so if that guy belongs to admin, then let us just show the admin dashboard. So welcome to admin dashboard. Okay, let me copy this, and if he's coming from marketing, then we are showing welcome to marketing dashboard, and same for sales. All right, and if these conditions are not met, then we will be just assuming that he is a normal user. So welcome to the dashboard maybe, or welcome to the console. So let's give it a save, and let's go back to the app.jsx. Instead of hello, let me just pass that dashboard component. Okay, and it's expecting a group. Let me get the group from the state. So group use state, and let's just pass an empty array for now. So here I'll be passing this group. Perfect. It's not happy, no unmissed variables. Okay, let me turn that off as well. Perfect. All right, so if I give it a save, go back to the console, you can see it's just giving me welcome to the console. Now if the user is from, let's say, admin group, then I'll be passing admin here, and it's showing me welcome to the admin dashboard. So this is the plan. This is our front end. Now we have to set up the functionality in the backend, right? So you already know we have to initialize an Amplify project. So let's do that quickly. Amplify init. Enter the project name. Company console is fine, and we'll be using AWS profile. YouTube test, we have created that, and now it is deploying everything in the backend. All right, so we have successfully created our Amplify project. Now we want to add the authentication category. So what do I mean by that? If I go back to the documentation, you can see we are having different categories, right? You already know the hosting category. So in this project, we will be learning about this authentication category. Okay, so select the authentication on, and if you want, you can go through the documentation, but let me just show you. So to add the authentication category, you need to run amplify add auth. So let me quickly run that. Amplify add auth. This will ask you a couple of questions, and if you want, you can go with the default configuration, but let's just go with the manual configuration. Let's see what are the things it is asking us. Okay, let me make some room here. So we want this user sign up, sign in, like normal stuff. Okay, and it is asking you to give some name. So you already know that inside the amplify directory it will create a folder, right, in the backend. So it is asking you for that name, but like whatever that is present here, that's kind of fine. Okay, and enter a name for your identity pool. If you do not know about identity pool, that's fine, you can just go with the default. Allow unauthenticated logins. We don't want any unauthenticated logins. And now it is asking you, do you want any third-party authentication providers? Like, do you want to add Google sign in, Facebook sign in, those kind of things? But right now, let's not go with that. Whatever user pool, that is fine. And how do you want users to be able to sign in? So we want the users to be able to sign in with their email addresses, right? You can choose whatever you want. And if you are stuck somewhere, you can just select this I want to learn more. It will give you like necessary hint, right? And obviously there are documentation, proper documentation, you can go through the docs as well. So let's select the email. And do you want to add user pool groups? Now this is the important part for us, because we are creating different groups, right? Different sections of our users. So yeah, we want to add some groups. So yes, and the first group will be admin. Do you want another group? Yes. Then let's call it sales, another one, and finally marketing. Okay, and we don't want any more. And then they're asking you for the group order. So group order is basically, let's say, so there will be some sort of permissions that will be attached to this group's users, right? So like what will be the preference of those permissions? If you do not like get it right away, that's fine. For our project, this is like whatever the default is, that's fine. Do you want to add admin queries API? No, we don't want that. Multi-factor authentication? No. And email-based user registration? Yeah, we want to register users. Specify email verification subject. If you like, when the user is registering for your application, what would be the verification subject? These things can be changed later. So whatever default is there, that's fine. Okay, if you want to add additional attribute for the users, you can add that from here, but we don't want that. And rest of the like defaults are kind of fine. Do you want to use OAuth flow? Here select no. And do you want to configure lambda triggers? No. And it's kind of done. Okay, now you already know, like when you are running amplify add or any category, then it is just adding those things into your backend folder. So in the backend you can see it has created this auth directory, right? But nothing has been pushed yet to the like AWS cloud. So to do that, what you have to do is amplify push auth. It is showing you the changes that has been created. So user pool groups that will be created in the backend, and the other stuff. Are you sure you want to continue? Yes. All right. So we have successfully deployed our authentication service to the backend. Now let me close this terminal, and if you look closely in our source directory, it has created a couple of files. You can see this AWS export and amplify configuration.json. These files were not present previously, right? So these are basically like from our front-end application. If we go back to our diagram, so you remember there's a component called amplify library, right? So with the amplify CLI, we have created those like services, and from our front-end application, we want to talk to those services now. And for that reason, we need amplify library. And to configure that amplify library, we need these configuration files, right? And if I go back to the documentation as well, you can see, yeah, amplify push, these things are done. And now we have to install a couple of libraries to move forward. So those libraries are here, they are showing it. So let me copy it. So basically AWS Amplify, this is a core library, and some UI component. So you remember this UI component as well. So we will be using some UI component for our React application. Let's install that as well. All right, so I have copied that. Let me just paste it here, and let's wait for this to be done. All right, so we have successfully installed those packages. Now the second thing what we have to do is we have to configure the Amplify library. Okay, so to do that we have to import that Amplify configuration.json. All right, and we have to bring this. So at the top they're showing it. Yeah, this part we have to perform. So let me copy this code, and let us open our main.jsx. Whatever I'm doing here, so for every Amplify project you have to perform this two step. It doesn't matter if you're using React or any other library or vanilla JavaScript. You have to perform this. You have to configure Amplify. Okay, so I'm bringing this Amplify configuration JSON, and from this Amplify, AWS Amplify, we are bringing this object Amplify, and there's a method called configure. We're just calling that and passing the configuration. So once our app is getting started, Amplify will be configured. Okay, so that's why we are putting it inside the main.jsx. All right, so that's kind of done. And for the UI, we have to bring some CSS as well. So that is this one. So you can see they are bringing this part, and this is some React specific code. Like if you are using React, then you have to bring this file. For Angular, they are having different libraries or different CSS files. Right, so we have imported the CSS for our UI component. Now to add authentication to our application, we simply have to call a higher order component. Let me show you, just it will make sense. This with authenticator, right? And with authenticator is a React specific component that is coming from UI React. Okay, and let us just call this higher order component, and let's pass this app component there. Okay, so if I give it a save, and let's run the development server now. So npm run dev. If I go back and hit refresh, you can see I'm getting a full-fledged sign-in form. Okay, and there are ways to create account as well. So let me quickly register for a new account with my personal email address, password. I'm just keeping password on to 3. Now all this validation and everything is in place. Okay, and everything is customizable. So if you visit the documentation and go to this UI library, you will get to know like whatever component you are using, how much you can customize, how to change the themings and all those things, right? Let's not worry about those part. I'm just showing you like where to get everything. Okay, so let me go back. Let me hit create account. No, I do not want to save. And now Amplify is using a service called Cognito under the hood for this user management stuff, right? And Cognito is automatically sending a confirmation code to that particular email, right? If you want, you can configure those domains and everything else, but out of the box, everything will just work. So let me just quickly grab the authentication code. Let me paste it here, hit confirm. Now you can see it is showing me welcome to admin dashboard. If I go back, I'm manually sending admin here. So let's not do that. So yeah, welcome to the console. That's kind of fine. Now I want to show you another part. That is, if I go back to the console, AWS console, and this AWS Amplify, let us find our project first. So company console, this is our project. Click on view app, and this is our environment, dev environment, and click on authentication. So from this console, if you click on this view incognito, like I want to see all the users that are present for my application, right? So click on this view incognito, and it will take you to another console. That is that particular service, Cognito service, right? So this is the one user pool we have just created, and this is the user we have signed up with this user. So you can see all the details about the user from here. Okay, if you want, you can bookmark this. So basically from the Amplify console, we are opening the Cognito console, the service Amplify is using to manage the user. And we are like selecting the particular user pool. Like this name, if you remember correctly, when you were selecting the options from the CLI, it was asking you for this name. Like if you want, you can give some meaningful name to your user pool. Okay. But the cool thing is, if you're using Amplify, you don't have to understand AWS Cognito like in depth. AWS Amplify is handling everything for you. Okay, so this is the user. If I click on this user, right now this user doesn't belong to any group. Okay, so let's do one thing. Let me add this user to our admin group. Okay, let's click add. Perfect. So now this user belongs to the admin group. Okay, let me go back to our code. And when you are calling this with authenticator higher order component, it will basically pass a function called sign out to this child component, right? And let me just print a button, call it logout, and on click, let's just call this sign out. Okay, let's give it a save. Now there should be a button here. So logout, let's log out. Now I can re-log in, right? Now before the re-login part, let me show you another thing. That is, I have the user now with me, okay? And from a session object, I want to extract out the group information for that user. So there is a particular function for that, that is called fetch session, auth session, right? That is coming from AWS Amplify /auth. If you are using server component or Next.js, then that's a separate story, but let's use the normal one. Okay, fetch auth session. So what I want to do is, let's have a simple use effect hook, and inside that, when the app loads, we want to just call this fetch auth session, and it will give you return you a promise. Basically from the local storage, it is getting all the authentication session, right? So let's call then here. So we are having the session, and inside the session, let's just console log the session. Let's see what are the things we are getting. Okay, so that's kind of good. Let me put my email address again. Still it's showing welcome to the console, because we didn't set up everything with our front end yet. So now it is printing out the session. So inside the session, you can see there are many things, right? We are interested on these tokens. So inside the tokens, we are having access token, and inside the access token, there's a payload. Okay, and in the payload, there is a cognito clone groups. Okay, and that is the group array. So if your user is belonging to multiple groups, so that will be included in this array. Okay, so we want from the sessions, tokens, access token, payload, and this part. So let me copy it one by one. Let me copy the path if I can. Yeah, property path. And instead of console logging, let me just have a variable like group. Let's call it incoming group. Okay, and the property will be on this session, tokens, access token, payload, and that part. So if we are having some incoming group, so for some user the group won't be present, right? So that's why we're just checking if incoming group, then we want to just set group, and let's pass this incoming group. Okay, give it a save. Now it is saying me welcome to admin dashboard. Okay, for a second it's showing me console, because it's returning a promise. You can add a loading spinner and all those things, but yeah, for now it's just showing you welcome to the admin dashboard. Now if you want, you can change the user. So let's remove the admin part, and let's add this user to our sales group maybe. Okay, revert back, log out and relog in. Yeah, welcome to sales dashboard. So we have completed the first application, and before going into the second app, I have a request. If you find this kind of content valuable for your AWS journey, please subscribe to this channel and give this video a thumbs up. That helps me tremendously. 90% of the audience are not subscribers, so if you can spare 2 seconds of your time and subscribe, I would highly appreciate that. That being said, let's start with our second application. So we'll be building a contact form like this. So you can see this kind of form in any of the blog post, or if you're having a portfolio website, if you want to collect the email address of the visitors, then you can add a contact form like this. So on the UI part, we'll be just collecting the email and the message that the user want to send you, right? And there's a submit button. So from the client, we will be hitting an API endpoint, and this API endpoint will trigger a Lambda function. And from this Lambda function, we will send an email to a predefined email address containing this email and the message that the user is sending, right? So all this part will be handled by Amplify. We'll be just configuring those, and Amplify will give us a place where we'll be able to write our Lambda code. So let's start building that. All right, so let us set up a React project. with vid, so npm create vid latest, and let's call it serverless contact form, and we'll be using React. And let us go with JavaScript. Cd into the directory, and let me open my code editor here. So first thing first, we have to install all the dependencies, and I'm thinking using ShatCN to build the UI part. So let me go to the ShatCN documentation, and let's see how we can get started. So we're going to install that for a wait project. So we have created this. Let me copy this command, paste it here, and after that we need to have a tsconfig.json. But as so this is for absolute import, right? But as we are using JavaScript, we'll be having a JS config instead. Okay, and finally we have to replace the wait config as well. Perfect. And it's not happy, no undefined. So there's some yes lint rule, so let me just have a quick fix for that. And yeah, now we can run this command. So let me copy it, and yeah, so let me paste it here. No theme default slide, global css file would be this index.css. So let me delete everything first, and let me copy the relative path. CSS variable, this is fine, this is fine, right? No, we are not using server component. Yeah, rest of the things are fine. So now we will install all the necessary dependencies and everything. And finally, let's use dark theme, right? So in my index.html on the body, let's have a class called dark. And so this is some tailwind stuff, if you're familiar with that. Text foreground and busy background. And as we are editing this index.html, let me copy the relative path, and on the tailwind config, let me add that here as well. Again, it's not happy. Let me add the quick fix for that. Okay, let's give it a global save. And we are not using app.css. I can delete that. And on the app.jsx, yeah, rest of the things we are not using. Let's just return a div, and inside that div, let us have a ShatCN button component. Let's see if everything is working properly or not. So let me initialize a button component. Done. So button. By the way, the absolute import is like, instead of this relative import, you can import it like this, right? So let's give it a save, and let me run the development server. Perfect. Let me go back to our browser. So localhost 5173, and yeah, the button is working. Let me click. So yeah, we're having a dark theme, and the component library is working as well. All right, so now let us add our UI components. So we'll be having a simple form, and if I go to the ShatCN, there's a form component. Yeah, this one. Let me initialize it. Yeah, done. And in the components, let us create a new component called contact form.jsx, and let us just copy the example code from here. Yeah, let me copy it. I guess we have to initialize the input component as well. So if I go back and let's find out the input component. Okay, let me initialize that as well. And we have to bring a couple of other things. That is this on submit handler that should go here. And let's call it, let's first default export it from here, and let's call it contact form. Right, we are not using TypeScript, so let me delete that. On submit is fine, and we have to initialize it with this use form component. So this is just some React form stuff. Okay, this is nothing to do with Amplify or AWS. This is complete React stuff. And form schema, we are good to go. Let me give it a save, and in the app.jsx, let me bring that form component. So instead of just having a button, let me have a contact form here. All right, we don't need the button. Let me run the development server. Perfect. Go back, and yeah, we are having a form component. Now it's occupying the whole space, so let's modify the UI a bit. So on the parent, we want to have a container, and let's have the maximum width as screen small. It looks good. Let me add some margin top. 20 would do the job, I guess. Yeah, it looks good. Now let me modify the form. So first, in the form schema, we're not having username. We'll be collecting the email, and that should be of type email. I hope you are familiar with this kind of stuff. And for the email, messages should be a valid email, right? And the message that they want to send, and that will be in string as well. C dot string, and message can be an optional. Perfect. Inside the contact form, on the default values, this will be email and message. That's fine. And on submit, right now we are just console logging the values. And on the first field, name should be email. Form label should be email as well. Placeholder hello @ email.com maybe. And we don't need any form description for now. Perfect. Let me copy this form field, and let us have the message field here as well. So let's call it, for message, instead of having an input, let me have an text area component. If you have that here, yeah, right. Perfect. So instead of bringing input, let me bring text area. Perfect. Placeholder your message. Am I missing anything else? Let's call it send, and let me make it full width. Perfect. Let's give it a save, and let us run the server again. Yep. So we are having, the space is looking bad. Let me reduce the space a bit. Yeah, now I guess it looks good. So we are having an email address field and message field. Let me add some random values here. Hit send. Should be a valid email. Perfect. Let's add a proper email address, and hi there. If I hit send, now it is console logging the values, right? So the UI component is working properly. All right, so our on submit handler is well and good. Now we don't want to console log here. So let me do one thing. Let me take the control here, right? So let me have a async function called handle send. Okay, and I'm expecting some values here. Perfect. And on the contact form, let me send it like this. On send, let me just call this function, and let us expect that here. So on send, and it's not happy because I have to turn up this off, right? And instead of having the on submit like this, let me just have on send. Right now in the app, we can have a console log values here if you want. Okay, now to mimic the server delay, let me return a promise from here. So return new promise, and you already know we'll be having a resolve and reject. So let's call set timeout inside it, and inside that, let me just console log, and we'll be calling response, resolve afterwards. Okay, this is not correct values, and let's give it a 2-second delay for now. Let's see what happens. So server is up and running. If I enter my email address, yeah, after 2 seconds I'm getting the responses, but on the form level, like, it is not disabling the button, and we are not having any loader or anything. So let me fix that as well. So in the contact form, let me go back to the documentation, because I don't know how do I add a loader in Shatsian. Where's the button component? Yeah, loading. Yeah, on the loading state, I can disable it. So button should be disabled when the form state should be is submitting. Yeah, and we want to show this icon there as well. So if form.form state dot is submitting, then print this icon, and that is coming from Lucid React. Let's not use this directive here. We are not in Next.js environment. Okay, let me give it a save. And now if I try to send a message, perfect. So we are mimicking the server delay on the app.jsx. Now to isolate these things, let me have a function here. So let's create a file called api.jsx, not jsx, just js is fine. And let me copy this thing. So handle, or let's call it send email and message. Okay, let me export this from here and send email and message. It should do the same thing. Now we just have to update this function. All right, so this is the architecture that will be followed when you are creating a REST API with AWS Amplify. So from the front-end client, you will hit the API gateway endpoint and it will look something like this. And there's a concept called base path, right? So whenever you are configuring an API gateway or a REST API, you will always configure a base path, right? So if I take an example of an e-commerce application, it can have multiple base path, right? So I can configure two base paths, let's say for user and for inventory. And for every base path, you can configure a Lambda function. If you're not familiar with Lambda function is basically like a piece of code, you can say. So the concept is from the front end client, whenever you are going to this URL /user, then that will trigger this Lambda function. And whenever you are going to this URL /inventory, that will trigger this Lambda function, this second one. Okay, so this is the base concept. You are creating an API gateway or REST API, and with that, you will be configuring some base path, and that base path will point towards some Lambda functions. And not only that, whatever request you are sending, like whatever HTTP verb you are using, all these requests will go to this single Lambda function, and from this function you have to decide like how to handle this request. And also this is called a greedy path. Greedy path means like if something is, some trailing path is after that, let's say you are sending a GET request to this endpoint /user /profile, that will also go to this Lambda function, and it can have multiple trailing paths. Okay, so this is the complete architecture. You are having a front end application. From that, you are hitting this endpoint, and you are providing the base path, and based on that base path, you are hitting a Lambda function. All right, now that we know how REST API is working inside Amplify, let's actually create on. Okay, let us initialize an Amplify project. So Amplify init, the name is fine. We know we have to change the distribution directory. Let's call it production, and VS Code, JavaScript, React, source directory is fine. This will be test, and rest of the things are fine. And for the AWS profile, we'll be using YouTube test. All right, so we have successfully initialized an Amplify project, and to add the API, we just have to type Amplify add API. We're interested in adding an REST API, and you can give this API a friendly name, right? So this is this part. So this is the API. You can call this, you can have multiple API gateway for a single project. Okay, so let's call it our contact form API, and this is that base path you can configure. Okay, so for now, let us just have a single base path called contact, and with this base path, we'll be handling all the email and messages and everything. Okay, hit enter. Now it is asking you to create the Lambda function for that base path, and if you have already a Lambda function created in your project, we'll be learning that in upcoming section, then you can select that. But as we do not have any Lambda function yet, we have to create one. Okay, so you have to give a friendly name to your Lambda function. So let's call it contact handler. Perfect. And we want to go with Node.js, and hello world is fine. Do you want to configure any advanced settings? For now, no. Do you want to edit the Lambda function now? Yes. This is the code for this Lambda function, and we'll see the structure in a bit. But yeah, let's finish this CLI process first. So it is asking you, do you want to restrict the API access? So for now, it is open, right? Anyone can hit your API endpoint. Okay, if you want, you can restrict that. But for now, let's not worry about that. Do you want to add another path? So no, we are happy with a single base path. So we have successfully created a REST API. Why this is not happy? Okay, so this is the Lambda function. Let me show you the file structure it has created. So in the backend folder, for every category, it will create a folder. So it has created API folder, and it has created a folder for your functions as well. So this is the function contact handler. And this is a simple, like inside this contact handler, there is a source directory, and this is a simple Node.js project. Okay, there is a package.json. The necessary dependencies you can add here. And if you open this index.js, this is the boilerplate code. All right. By the way, one thing I want to mention. So this is a hello world. Like it is giving you a single handler. If you want, you can create a Lambda function with serverless Express. So if you are familiar with the library Express.js, then you can do that. So whenever if someone is going to this route /user, that will hit your Express.js app, and from that you can handle multiple HTTP verb and all the trailing paths and everything. But for now, we can just manually do that because we are having a single route called /contact. Now inside the Lambda function, this is the simple function that it will run. This is an async function. Okay. And for now, it is just console logging the event that is coming. So in this event, we'll be having all the body, all the HTTP method and everything. So if I take options here, you can see this body, headers, HTTP method that is being used. Okay. So yeah, all this other configuration will be there as well. So that we will see in a bit. And whatever things you are returning from this function, so from this function, whatever things you are returning, that will go to this API gateway, and API gateway will return that to the client. All right. So this is the plan. Now, for now, it is just sending some hard coding things. So let's do one thing. Instead of console logging the event, let me just send the event back to the user, and let us turn on the course thing as well. Okay. So let me give it a save. Now, as you know, everything is in our local system. We have to send all these changes to our backend. So let me type amplify push. You don't have to mention anything, then it will push the function as well. So it will create the function and it will create the API gateway. Yes, we want to continue. So once this is getting deployed, let's go back to our documentation, and let's find out the REST API part. So this is the API REST, configure REST API. So we have completed the configuration part. Now we want to access our API gateway from our front-end application. And if you remember correctly from the previous diagram, so let me find the diagram. Yeah, so we want to access this API gateway from our front-end application. So we have to install a couple of libraries. Okay, so let us find that. So this is that library, AWS Amplify. So let me open a separate window. Let us install it. npm install AWS Amplify. And whenever you are installing AWS Amplify, you have to configure that. In the previous project, we did this as well. So now it is installing AWS Amplify. All right, the installation has been done, and also we have successfully deployed the API gateway. So this is the API gateway endpoint. And after that, we have to just add /contact to hit that Lambda function. Okay. Now let us quickly set up this library. And to do that, let me copy the code, and we have to do that in our main.jsx file. Perfect. So we are getting Amplify from AWS Amplify and Amplify config from this config.json, and we are just configuring. Okay, that's fine. And in the app. Let me close this. In the app.jsx, we are passing this send email and message, right? And this is our api.js file. Let us do one thing. There's a post method. Let me import a method from AWS Amplify /API. Okay, the method is post. So we want to send a post request. So let me copy that. Constant response is equal to post. Let me add that as well. And we'll be able to send some options. So API name, remember whatever API name we have given. So that will be present here as well. Yeah, contact form API. Let me copy that from there. And path, we want to hit is contact, because you can have multiple paths, base paths, right? And in the options, we want to send the body, and in the body, whatever values we are having, right? So let me just send the values. This post is basically like, if you are familiar with the fetch API, right? This post is basically a wrapper around that fetch API, right? So let me go to the documentation, and you will see an example code here. Okay, so this is the thing, it is returning from the post, and we have to get the response, awaiting it, and from that we'll be having the body, and we have to convert that body into JSON as well. Let me do one thing, let me copy this, let me paste it here first, and this will be contact from API and slash contact. Perfect. And instead of body as message, let me just send all the values, right? And whatever response we are getting, we are just console logging that. Let's not return anything. Yeah, let me give it a save, and let's run our development server. So npm run dev. We want to see what are the events that is coming, because if I open this lambda function, you can see like whatever event that is coming to this lambda function, we are just sending back those event. Now this is our application, and we want to send something. Okay, hit send, we are getting the response. So this is the event that is getting passed to the lambda function. So in the body you can see I'm sending email, and that is coming as a string. We have to json.parse this, and we're having email message, and in the headers we are having all the headers related information, whatever method we are using, that is getting passed as well, path, and many other things. If we are sending any query parameters, path parameters, that will be coming along as well. Okay, so if you are sending, let's say slash contact id, so in the path parameters you will be having that id. All right, so this kind of information we are getting in the event. All right, now we'll be discussing how we can send email from our lambda function, right? If you want, there are many services like Mailchimp, SendGrid, you can use those services, right? But as I'm a big fan of AWS, I'll be using a service called Amazon Simple Email Service. Okay, Amazon AWS ACS to send the mail. So yeah, this is the SendGrid documentation. If you want, you can use this SendGrid. So let me go to the AWS console and let me search for ACS or simple email service. Now, if it does not make any sense, that's fine. You can just follow along and configure everything. And if you want to know more about ACS, you can let me know. Now, if this section is not visible, then click here, and you will get the main menu, and click on the identities. Now you have to create a new identity. Okay, so click on create identity, and we want to add a new email address. Add your email address here. So I'm adding mine. Okay, and hit create identity. Now on your email they have sent a verification code, right? So you have to verify that. So let me quickly verify that. Yeah, from this Amazon Web Services, right? So this is the verification link. Let me click on this and it should get verified. Yeah, so I have successfully verified. Okay, now if I hit refresh, it should show me, yeah, identity status verified. Now what we are going to be doing is, we have an identity now, this email address. So we'll be using this email address to send mail. So this will be a circular mail. So will be the from email would be this email address, and the to email would be this email address as well. Okay, it will make sense whatever I'm talking about. So Amazon ACS configuration is done, and if you are using this setup in production environment, then you have to remove your account from Sandbox, and you have to mail them and explain why do you want to use this email service, right? I'm not showing you these things. Whatever we are having right now, that's fine for us. Okay, so I have configured the email one. Now in our lambda function, what we want to do is, we want to access this ACS service, right? Now by default inside AWS, you cannot just access any other service from a service, right? So lambda is a service, and you want to access ACS from lambda, so you have to give certain permission to lambda to access this ACS service. So let's do that. So if you go to this function directory, this lambda function, and here you can see there's a file called custom policies, and we have to add certain policies here. And what do we have to add? Let's go to Google and search for AWS ACS full access policy. You can ask ChatGPT as well if you want. Let's see if we have any JSON document here. Yeah, this one will do the job, I guess. So let me copy the statement from here and let me paste it here. Okay, and I guess it will be an array. This is a bug inside Amplify, so you have to put all the resources inside an array. But if you do not do that, it will give you an error message, and from that error message you will understand that you have to put this star as an array, right? So this is a typical AWS policy statement. I'm showing you an advanced case. Like if you are using MailChimp or SendGrid, then you don't have to go through this setup, right? But as I'm accessing SES from Lambda, that's why I have to do that. And this is a typical policy statement, right? This effect is like I'm allowing this kind of action. So any type of ACS action on any resource. Okay. If you want to narrow down the scope, then you can mention the resources here, right? Resource ARN, and that might confuse you for now. So whatever I have put, if you do not understand this part, you can just follow along, no problem with that. Okay. So we have the proper policy in place now. Now we'll be using AWS SDK in our Lambda function to talk to AWS ACS. So let us open the browser and search for AWS SDK v3 and go ahead and bookmark this as well, right? So I have already bookmarked this, and you need this API references. Okay. So if I go to my bookmark, you can see this is the API reference. Yeah, now from here I have to search for ACS. Okay, and I want this ACS v2 version 2. If you want, you can work with this ACS version 1 as well, but let us just go with ACS version 2. So let me install it quickly. Now if I install it here, it will put all the necessary dependencies in our top level package.json, right? This in this node module, but we do not want that. We want to access it from here. So we want the library code to be bundled with our Lambda function. So let me open a terminal window here in this source directory. And if you are on a VS Code, you can just select here, open an integrated terminal. That will open a terminal window there, right? And let's install client ACS v2. Once that is getting installed, let us search for the operation. We want to send a mail. Do I have a send mail? Yeah, send email command. Click on that and they will give you a proper example of how you can send a mail. So let me copy this whole thing and let's create a new file called ACS client.js. Okay, and let me paste all the code here. And it's not happy. Let me turn off these things. These are super annoying. So ESLint, let me off that. No unused first. Let me turn up that as well. Now we have to use the common JS syntax. So require this thing, and we are getting the client. And when we are creating the client, let me actually pass some configuration here. So we want to pass the region. So this region is coming from here. So when you are like creating this identity, whatever region you are selecting, you have to put it there. Okay, so I'm taking app south on, whatever region you want, you can put there. So did I copy it properly? Let me just type it out. App south on. Perfect. Now we have made the client. Now let me export this client from here. So module.exports.client, let's call it ACS client, is equal to this client. Perfect. Now let me have another file called sendemail.js. Okay, and let me cart everything from here. Perfect. And let me paste it in this send email. So this is the input. Let's have a simple function like this. So module.exports.send email is equal to an async function, and inside this function let us paste all the code, right? So what are the things we are expecting? We are expecting the from email, we expect the to email. So let me replace it here. So from email address, we will be taking from the parameters. From email address ARN is not important. Destination to address, you can send multiple email. Okay, so that's why this is an array, so you can pass an email list, but we are happy with a single email for now. Perfect. CC, BCC, these are not important. Reply to address, we don't want that. And on the content side, we want the subject, okay, and the body. Perfect. So subject. On the data part, we just have to pass the subject, and on the body part, we want to send a text email for now. So on the data, let me just pass the body. If you want, you can pass the HTML email as well. On the headers, we don't want any header, and raw template, these are not needed as well. Perfect. Email tags, configuration set name, these things are not needed as well. And we are creating a command by calling send email command. Okay, am I taking it from here? CS client, yeah, send email command. So let me copy it, let me cut it from here. Perfect. Let me paste at the top, and yeah, send email command. Now we are passing that input to the send email command, and let me just do it like this. So return client dot send, and we're just passing this command. Now let me actually expect the client here as well. So client. Perfect. So we have everything prepared. So we are having a ACS client, and we are having a send email command, and we'll be able to send email from our main file. So let me open the main file. Now from the event, if you remember correctly, we'll be able to extract out the body, right? So let me do that. So constant json.parse, and let me just pass that event.body. Okay, and let me have the email and the message. Perfect. And now outside this handler, we want to actually initialize that ACS client. Okay, so constant client is equal to yeah, ACS client. We can just bring the ACS client from there. So ACS client is fine. All right, now we have the ACS client in place, and we have the email and message. Let me have the send email function as well. So send email, and we'll be awaiting this. Perfect. And let me pass everything one by one. On the client part, let me just pass ACS client. Perfect. On the subject part, let's call it new message. Okay, and on the body, let me pass a template literal string. Email should be equal to the email. Let's take a new line, and let's pass the message here as well. Message is equal to whatever message that is coming in the body. Perfect. And once that is done, we in the body we can send json.stringify has been submitted properly. Right. So this is what we're doing in the handler. We're having the event. From the event, we are extracting out the email and message from the event body. Okay, then we are calling this send email function, and inside this function we are like creating all this AWS SDK specific thing. Perfect. And to send a command, we need a client. We are building that as well. And finally, once everything is done, we're sending a status code 200, and in the body we're just sending a success message. Right. So everything should work now. Let me open my terminal, and let us actually do an amplify push. By the way, I am missing something, I guess. So in the body, we have to pass the to and from as well. Okay, so let me have a constant here. From email is equal to, I'm just putting my email here, hard coding. If you want, you can read this from environment variable. But so this is what I meant by to and from is a similar email. Okay, now let me just do amplify push. Let's see what are the changes we are having. So yeah, on the function side, we are having an update. Yeah, we want to continue. All right, so we have successfully deployed the function. Now let's do a global test. So before that, let me run our development server npm run dev. Perfect. And let's give it a try. So let me have a test email, and in the message, let's just say hi there. So yeah, has been submitted properly. Now if I open my Gmail application, you can see I got a new mail, and here email is equal to test@test.com, and message is equal to hi there. Okay, and you can see the from address and to address are similar. Okay, and this is coming from Amazon server. Right now we are on a local host, right? So we cannot share this link with anyone. Now let me show you how we can publish this website to the cloud and get a shareable link. Okay, so we'll be able to publish our front end. So let me quit out from the server and just type amplify add hosting. So this is another category. So hosting will basically zip up all of your front end code. Like it will first build, and that's why it was asking your build directory. Remember, and the build script and all, everything. So it will build everything, and it will ship everything to the cloud, and it will put a CDN in front of that as well. So we'll be choosing the first one, by the way, hosting with Amplify console, and manual deployment is fine. If you want, you can go with git based deployment, but that is kind of involved, so right now I'm not showing you how to setting up those. If you follow the documentation, you will be able to follow along, no problem. All right, so right now this hosting is added on all local. You already know, like whenever you are adding a category, that will be inside your local, right? So now we have to push all the changes to the backend, right? So when you are pushing the hosting, like it will build your front end code as well. So there's a different command to do that. So first it will build, then it will push. So the combined command is amplify publish. So let me just copy and paste it here, amplify publish. So now you can see it will create this hosting services for us. Yes, we want to do that. So you can see it is building that Vite project, right? And yeah, build is done and deployment is also completed. So this is our new link. So basically I can copy this, and if I can paste it here, I should be having, yeah, this is the form. So you can share this link with anyone. They will be able to enter their email and message and send you that. So let us give it a full try. Well, let me do one thing. Let me open a new incognito window. So let me paste the email here. So now hello@email.com maybe, and test message, hit send. Yeah, we are getting has been submitted properly. You can modify the UI, like after the message has been submitted, you can show some like thank you note or something like that. So yeah, you can see I'm getting a new message that is from, yeah, email hello@email.com, and message is equal to test message. Right, so looks like everything is working properly. All right, so we have completed our second application. Now let's go to our third and final project, where we will be building a voting app or a polling app. All right, so this is the wireframe for our next application. This will be the home page. So once you log in, you will be having all of your polls, right? So poll 1, poll 2, like whatever name you are giving, and then you will be able to create poll. Once you are clicking on this create poll button, it will take you to another page. So on this page, you will be able to create poll. So you will be giving this poll a name and the options you are having. Right, let's say which is your favorite food, and chicken, egg, and something else maybe. Okay, and you can add as many options as you want. Then finally you hit the create poll, and it will create the poll for you. Okay, now we'll be generating a unique link for every poll, right? And you will be able to share that link with someone. Okay, so once someone is opening that poll, it will show a page like this. By the way, he or she needs to be logged in first, and obviously that will be behind an authentication also. You have to log in first to respond to any poll. Okay, so if any public, like any other user, is opening that poll with that particular poll ID that we'll be creating, like that will be a unique ID for every poll, right? So you can choose any option, and then you can submit. All right, but as a owner, if you are opening that poll, so let's say I have created this poll, and as a owner, if I open it, then I'll be able to see like how many votes were given on a particular option. So this is our complete idea. We have to create 4 pages. All right, so I have created a React app with Vite, and I have installed Tailwind CSS and Shat CN UI. And for the previous project also, we are using this. So I really don't want to bore you by showing all the setup again. So this is a simple React app. So let me actually run it. npm run deb. Let's see what are the things we are having. All right, so localhost 5173. So we're just having a simple button. All right, so as you can see in our wireframe, we are having 4 pages, right? And technically 3 pages, but inside this page you will be having 2 different components based on the user type. Okay, so to create the routing, we need React Router. And if you're using Next.js, then you don't have to install this. You can just follow the Next Router. Okay, but yeah, let's install React Router. So let me go to the documentation and getting started tutorial. Yeah, so this is the package you need, React Router DOM, and that is just very simple API, so it will make sense. So let me just install it. So npm install that router name. Perfect. And how do you use this router? you just import this create browser router provider, and you can just pass that. Let me just copy this part and it will make sense. So let us open the app.jsx. We're just having a simple button component. Let me put that here. Why this is not happy? No unused for. Okay, let me turn this off first. Right, so for now it is using browser router is whatever route you are familiar with, right? But we want to use a hash router, and it will make sense what is hash router. But let me just set up everything first. So instead of returning this component, let me just return this route provider, and we have to pass this router. And instead of calling this create browser router, let me call this function. And why are we importing index.css here? I don't know. Let me remove the button component. Let us give it a save, and let's run the development server. So now you can see we are getting hello world, right? Now if I have a link component here, so there's a default link component to add the navigation. Let's have a create link, right? And if you click on this link, that will take you to this create route. So like this, right? And for create route, let us have a path, and that will be this path. And let's have a div. No, inside element we should have a div, not div. Okay, so poll create or create poll. Now if I go back and click on this create, it should take me to this create poll, and you can see there is a hash in between these paths, right? So this is called hash router. So to keep things simple, we are using this hash router. So basically your browser will not request for another HTML page. Okay, so this is some React and normal browser kind of stuff, so let's not worry about that. So this is our routing, and yeah, so our homepage, on our homepage, whatever polls we are having, we'll be listing that, and on our create page we will be having these components. So instead of just creating everything here, let me create a separate component for create. So create poll, perfect, create poll, and on the element part, let me just import that. So create poll. All right, and we'll be coming to this home component later. So inside the create poll, now let me add the layouting first. So let's make it a container. This is some Tailwind stuff, by the way, and max width screen small is fine, and let me add some top margin as well. And first thing first, we have to give this page a name. So let's have a h1 tag, create poll, and text 2xl, maybe it's fine. MB12, and then we'll be having this form. So create poll, and then the form add option, create poll. So we need an input for this poll name. So to do that, let me go back to chatcn, and we need an input component. Perfect. Let me add that. All right, so first thing, input, let's have just the placeholder for now, or poll name. Right, let's see how does it look. Okay, let me run the server again. So why this is still showing create poll? Am I bringing the component properly? Okay, create poll. Oh, sorry, for the home component I'm calling this, and this should be that link, create 2. All right, perfect. And so we are having this create poll title, and then we are having this poll name input field. Right, now let us add the option. So for the options, let us have a state called options and set options. I'm not installing any form handling library or validation library. You can do that for yourself, because this is not a UI focused tutorial. So let's bring use state, and for now option will be an empty array, maybe. Okay, and after this input, let me have another div, and inside div we can map these options. So options dot map option, and we'll be having an input for this as well, right? And for the key, the option will be an object, right? And every option will be having an ID and whatever value the option is containing. So let me just type it out and it will make sense. And value will be coming from option.value. Okay, let's give it a save. So right now we're not having anything because we have an empty array. Let me have a button called add option. Okay, and inside this div, let's have some space on the vertical direction, space y. 2 is fine, I guess. Now once you are clicking on this add option, we want to fire this function. So handle, these are all related to React, right? If you are familiar with React, then these are like very simple silly stuff. On click, handle add option, and if you are clicking on that, so let me just do this set option, options goes to, let me just spread all the incoming options, and we'll be having an ID, and for that let me install another library called short ID. So npm I short ID, I guess, short ID. Yep, perfect. And inside this short ID there should be a method called generate, most probably. Yeah, so let us generate an ID, right? And the value, for the starting value, let's call it untitled option. Okay, now if I go here and click here, so you can see I can add different options. Perfect. Now let me just fix this as well. Space y12. Let's see how does it look. Let's make it 8. All right, and let's work on the styling a bit more. So let's give it a padding and a border of 1 pixel. Let's make it 4 and round medium. Yeah, now it does look good. So you first add the poll name and then whatever options you are having. So currently it is just some fixed option. Let me open the, yep, we are having some error. No problem with that. So now we want to handle the changes of that options. Okay, how to do that? Let me have a function handle option change. Okay, and when you are calling this, I'm expecting you will be sending me an event, and from this event we'll be extracting that value and the option ID, right? So in here let's have a onChange handler, and in the onChange handler we'll be having an event, and let me call this handle option change. Let's pass this e and whatever option. Okay, from this option we'll be extracting out this ID. Perfect. Now inside this array, in JavaScript there's a method called spliced. Okay, so we'll be using that splice method to replace an element from this array. Okay, so if you're not familiar with spliced or to spliced, then you can visit the MDN docs. So set options, again options, and for now let's call it options.to spliced. Okay, if you're just calling splice, then that will not return a new array. Okay, and inside React, you have to, like inside this set option, you have to pass a new array. Okay, so let's call to spliced. So to spliced will not mutate the existing array, right? It will just return a completely new array. So to spliced, and we first want to know the index of the option that has this ID. Okay, so we can call like this. So options dot index of or find index, I guess, find index, and where option dot ID is equal to the incoming ID. Perfect, and that will be options, yeah, find index. And after that we are having the index. On that index we want to delete on item, and we want to add this. Okay, ID will be same, and value will collect from this e dot target dot value. Right, let's give it a save. Let's see if it is working properly or not. So add option. Yeah, two children with the same key. Why is the same key? Okay, key should be ID. Perfect. Add option. Perfect. Everything is working perfectly. And now let us add a separate button called create button. So create poll. Let's work on the styling. Okay. And one click. Let's just have handle create. Let's have a function handle create. Perfect. So inside this function will be handle the creation. So before that, let me collect the name as well. Pretty simple stuff. Name, set name, use state. Let's start with untitled poll. Untitled poll. Perfect. So on this input, let me add the value name on change. Just equals to set name e dot target dot value. Perfect. So when someone is clicking on this handle create, let me just log everything. So log that name and log the options we're having. Perfect. So let's call it test poll. Option 1, option 2, create poll. I'm having test poll and all the options. So these are the options ID, option 1, and yeah, this is the second ID and option 2. Perfect. So everything is working as expected. Now in this lib directory, let's have a API file, api.js, and let's have this. So create export async function create poll. Perfect. And for now, just return a dummy promise, which will wait for 2 seconds maybe. Promise resolve. These are pretty simple JavaScript stuff. So let's call set timeout. We'll be calling this resolve after 2 seconds. Okay. Now here, instead of just console logging the things, let me just call that create poll. Right. And create poll is expecting the name and the options. Right. So name and options. Perfect. Now to handle the loading state, so if I show you here, if I click here, you can see we are not getting any feedback, right? So let's handle the loading state as well. So constant loading, set loading, use state. At the start, loading is false, but when we are calling this handle create, let's make it set loading is equal to true. And once the promise is resolved, so let's call it finally set loading false. Right. Now when it is loading, let us disable this button, disabled during loading, and let's import the loading thing from here. Button, do I have any loading state? Come on. Yeah, let me just copy this like this. So if loading, let me import this as well. Perfect. Now if I'm having this poll, let's say test poll, add option 1, 2. Now if I click on this create poll, perfect, everything is working as expected. So UI is ready. Now we just have to replace this create poll function with the actual implementation. All right, so in our api.js, let us have some dummy data. Let me just copy paste it. So we'll be having some dummy polls, right? And let's have an async function called list polls. right? And let me just return the polls from here. Let me run the development server. And for now, in our router, for the home page, we're just having this dummy component, right? So in the component, let us have a new component for the home, JSX. So let me add the layout first. Now I'm just repeating myself. If you want, you can just struct out a component, layout component. Okay. So this will be a container, and max width, screen small is fine. Let's just have that 20 top margin, right? And let us just have my polls here, class name, and this should be text to Excel. Perfect. And MB12 is fine. And here we'll be listing all of our polls, right? Let me have it like this. So let's have an state called polls, set polls, use state, and inside an use effect hook, let me actually bring all those polls, right? So list polls. Once that is done, we'll be having some polls. Set polls, let me pass that, right? And inside this div, now let us actually go through that polls. So polls dot map, let's take all the polls, and let me just pass it inside here. So poll dot name, do we have a name? Perfect. And on the key side, let me just pass poll dot id. Let's give it a save, and our development server is running. So let's just check how things are going on. Still we are having this create button. So let us open this app.jsx. Instead of just passing this hard-coded component, let me pass home here. Perfect. Let me close this out. So we are getting my first poll, and second poll. Okay, perfect. Now let's work on the design part a bit. So class name, let's change the busy background color to select 800. Let's make it round, and let's give it a space y of 2 maybe. Yep, perfect. Okay, let me give it a padding as well. P4 is fine, I guess. Perfect. And cursor pointer. So now whatever polls you will be having, that will be listed here, right? And you will be able to click on this poll, and that will take you to the respective polls page. Okay, so let me quickly handle that. So instead of div, let me make it a link. Okay, and link is coming from React Router DOM. Perfect. And link will be an inline block, I guess. So let me make it block. And for the two, we are having a path like this maybe. So first poll and then the id. So poll.id. Perfect. Now it should take me to that. Yeah, right now it's giving me 404 because we don't have any poll page. So let me quickly create one. So single poll.jsx, and let me just grab the id from the path. Okay, so that will be from use param hook. So this is coming from again React Router DOM, and I'm expecting you're already familiar with use param if you're familiar with React. So let me just pass the id here. Perfect. And again on the app.jsx, let us create a new route, poll, and let's make a variable route like this. So single poll. Perfect. And now if I click on any of those, I should be redirected to the particular poll id. All right, everything is working perfectly. Now on the home page, let me put a create button. So button, and create poll is fine. Now we don't want this direct chat cn button, right? So there's a concept inside chat cn. If you pass this prop as child, then you can pass any other component inside here. So let's pass this link component. Perfect. And let's change the class name to full width. Perfect. And from the two we should redirect to the create page. Perfect. Yeah, it's working perfectly. All right, so my poll, so all of the polls will be listed here. And if you click on this create poll, it will take you the poll page, right? You'll be able to add different options and everything. And if you click on this create poll, it will create a poll and take you to the list page again. Okay, so for now this is the bare minimum UI setup. That's kind of okay for us. And finally, one more thing I want to do it here is when you are creating the poll, after set loading to false, we want to programmatically redirect the user as well. So let's quickly do that. Use redirect or use route, I guess. I don't clearly remember. So yeah, use navigate, and that will give me this navigate function, I guess. Is it? Yeah, navigate function. So after the set loading to false, we can navigate to that particular polls page, or we can navigate to the list. Let me go to the polls page. So poll, and the id will be coming from this create poll, right? So here the new poll will be there. So let me just pass an template string. Perfect. And poll.id. Perfect. So in the create API, I'm expecting to have an ID as well. So calling the response, let me pass the proper thing here. So let's do like this. So new poll is equal to then let's create the ID on the fly. So that is coming from this generate function, the name. And for now let's just pass all the options. Okay, so this is the new poll. Let me just push those polls here. So polls.push new poll. Perfect. And finally, once we're sending the response, let me just send the new poll. Let's see what happens. So give it a refresh, create poll, third one, and option 1, option 2, create poll. Something is wrong. Cannot try reading of ID. All right. Okay, not the finally. I should call it here. So dot then, and so poll, and this should go here. Perfect. And finally, we're just setting the loading state to that. This will give us some error, I guess. Let's see. So let me create a poll. Yeah, so single poll, and it's working perfectly. So create poll, untitled poll is fine. So create poll, untitled option is fine. Yeah, it's taking me to the perfect page, and this is the untitled poll. All right, so I'm confused with this part. I should not update the loading state after the navigation is done. Okay, but yeah, you can take care of that part. This is the UI component, so let's not worry about that for now. But yeah, UI is kind of done. Now this will be our main file, and inside this file we will be replacing this dummy data with the actual data. All right, let us initialize a Amplify project now. So Amplify in it. Okay, poll app, the name is fine. We have to change the distribution directory. Rest of the things are fine. So this will be dist. Perfect. Yeah, let's choose YouTube test for the AWS profile. So we have initialized in the Amplify project. Now this time we will choose a different API. So let's start discussing about that. All right. So when you are running this Amplify add API command, you can actually add two types of API. The first one we already saw. This is called REST API, right? And the second one is GraphQL API. Now this is kind of a superset of actual GraphQL that you know. So if I open the GraphQL documentation and open the GraphQL schema, you are already familiar with this kind of schema, right? So you create a data type, you put the name type, and then you mention the type name, right? So they're creating a character type that has a property called name that should be a string, and with this exclamation it is saying that that must be present inside a character. Okay, this is required. And if you are denoting an array, then you are just putting whatever value. So they are calling it episode, so appears in will be an array of episodes. All right, so in this fashion you can actually write GraphQL schema, right? So if you want to use GraphQL inside Amplify, then obviously you have to understand the GraphQL schema part, otherwise you won't be able to create it, right? And this is kind of simple things. If you're not even familiar with GraphQL, it will take you 1 or 2 hours to get familiar with the schema types. All right, so we are planning to create a GraphQL API. So let's start with that process. So Amplify, add API, and let us choose the GraphQL on. Okay. For now, whatever default is there, we are okay with that. And let's take this complex one-to-many relationship schema. Okay, we'll be discussing so many things here. Anyway, so our schema is done. So let us see what are the files it has created. Okay, so in the backend directory, you can see we have an API directory, right? In this API directory, previously we are having our REST API configuration. So in this API directory, we are having a POLAP API, and this is a GraphQL API this time. All right, and this is the schema.graphql. Now, if you are familiar with AWS AppSync, then under the hood it is using AWS AppSync, but as we are in an Amplify world, we don't have to worry about the AppSync part. Okay, so this is the schema. First, ignore this part, just focus on these things. Okay, and this directive you can ignore for now as well. So they are creating a blog schema. Okay, so this is a blog schema. Blog will have an ID will be like required, then blog can have a name, and blog will have multiple post, right? And post, the type of post will be this. Okay, so you can see blog will be having multiple post array, post will be having multiple comments, comment array, and this is the comment schema. Okay, so when you are creating any kind of entity or object, then you have to mention this type field first, right? So this is basic GraphQL. Now Amplify has introduced a couple of custom directives. So if I Google this term, so GraphQL custom directives, actually you can create your own directive if you want. Okay, so Amplify team is doing that. So they have introduced some custom directives, and in a moment we'll be discussing about some of these custom directives. All right, so let's discuss the first one. This is the most important on this model directive. Okay, model directive means, okay, before going into that, let me actually show you the custom directives list. Okay, so in this search bar, if I search for directives, so we are having directive reference. Okay, so these are all the list custom directories that Amplify has. Okay, so this is the first main on model directives. If you are marking any type with this model directive in the backend, it will create a DynamoDB table for the type, right? So for example, here we are marking this block type with this model, right? So Amplify will create a DynamoDB database table for you. Okay, and on that table you will be able to add the ID, name, post, these things, right? And it will expose the necessary API to store, delete, create, basically to perform all the CRUD operation on this DynamoDB table, right? So this is super powerful. Right now, if it does not make any sense, that's fine. When we'll be working with our own model or our own type, it will make sense, right? And this has many belongs to. These are two, like if you are familiar with those one to one, one to many, many to many relationship that are present in relational database, right? So to support those, like in your data, obviously there will be some relations. Like in here, blog will be having multiple posts, so this is a one to many relationship, right? One blog will be having multiple posts. So to denote the on to many relationship, you have to make it like this. So has many and belongs to. All right. So if you want to learn more, you can go to the documentation and customize your data model, right? And from here, you will get to know like how to create all this many to many, one to many relationship, right? So there are many types of relationship you can have, like many complex data types you can support with Amplify directives. All right. So enough talking. Let us keep this schema for now, and let us try to model our own data. So if I open our existing API file, you can see we're having a thing called poll, right? And poll will be having ID and the name, all right? And a single poll can have multiple options, all right? So let us start tackling this in this fashion. So poll, and this will be having an ID, and for now this will be having a name as well. So name will be string, all right? And these two values are mandatory. And whenever someone is creating a poll, we want to store the user ID, like the owner ID for that poll as well, okay? And that will be an ID as well. Perfect. Now inside the poll we'll be having a complex data type, that is poll option, okay? And for the poll option, we are having, let me open the ID and the web value. Perfect. So ID, that is type of ID, and value will be type of string, okay? Perfect. And here we can have multiple options, okay? And options will be poll options. Perfect. And this is also required. Now we want to perform some CRUD operation on this poll, right? So let us actually mark it as a model, all right? And we want to store all the responses as well. So let us have another type called poll response, and this will be an ID as well, ID of type ID, and this will have this poll of this poll type, and this will be the belongs to, right? And as we are marking this as belongs to, so let us have a response, and response will be poll response. Perfect. Okay, and this is not mandatory because at the start maybe we are not having any response, okay? So let us put a has many here. Perfect. And also here we want to have a user ID, because who is giving this response, okay? We want to store that as well. So let's have a user ID. So user ID will be ID as well, okay? So poll response. Now we want to store this poll response inside DynamoDB database as well, all right? So let's have a model like this, and we can remove rest of the things from here. Now these things, like how I am modeling this data, this is kind of a separate topic, okay? You have to know a little bit about database design, and inside DynamoDB you basically use a single level design approach, but for AppSync and Amplify you can go with this multi-table approach. Actually in the documentation also they are suggesting this fashion, okay? And if you want to learn more, you have to go through the documentation. You have to see multiple models, like how they are actually modeling the data types, okay? Then it will start making sense. But for now this is kind of fine. And we'll be having multiple access pattern is like we will want to like retrieve all the polls by the user ID maybe, right? So there's a concept inside DynamoDB database that is called secondary index. So we have to put a secondary index onto this user ID. So to do that, let me actually search here. So customize your data model, and select this one, configure a secondary index, okay? So to create a secondary index, you have to just mark it by index, okay? And and you will be able to pass some options as well. So let me just copy this, and I will explain afterwards. So you have to give this index a name. So the name is, let's call it by user ID or by user, and it will create some query field in the front end. So uh, the query field we want is polls or just by user. Okay, name and query field can be same, no problem with that, or polls by user. If you want, you can go with that as well. All right, so now we'll be able to retrieve all the polls by this user ID. Okay, polls will be having some optional responses, and all the responses will be storing in a separate table with the ID, and that response will point to this poll which this belongs to, and we'll be having a user ID as well, like who is giving this response. All right, so this is our data type. Let me give it a save, and this part is basically, for now we are making it open for everyone. Okay, we are not imposing any authentication rule, so anyone can create poll, anyone can delete it, read it. Okay, so for learning purposes this is fine, but there's a complete section here, customize authorization rule. So you can go through this to actually create different authorization rule, like who can access the data type, and you can impose some field level rules as well. We'll be coming to that part later. So now if I do amplify push, let's say what we are getting. Let me give it a save before that. And if we are not happy with this, then obviously we can change this, and we can update this actually. So are you sure you want to continue? Yes. Do you want to generate code for your newly created GraphQL API? Yes, we want. And choose the code generation language target. We want the code to be in JavaScript. Okay. And rest of the things, like whatever default is there, that's fine. It will generate some front end code for us. All right, so our schema has been deployed, and all the necessary tables and everything has been created as well. And I saw there's a mistake from our side, that is like in the poll response. Right now we're just tracking like what will be the poll, right, and the user ID who is giving this response, but we are not tracking the poll option, right, for which option we are giving this response. Okay, so that we have to track as well. So let's call it response ID, and that is the ID as well. So basically this ID will be recording in the poll response, right? So let me redeploy. Now let me go back to the documentation, and let's see what are the libraries we need to talk to this GraphQL endpoint. So obviously that core library, AWS Amplify. So let me quickly install that, and now we have to do that configuration. Now before this configuration part, I want to show you some things. It has created a couple of files in our frontend directory. So inside this source, you can see it has created a GraphQL. Okay, so inside this GraphQL directory, there are many mutations, queries, subscription. These are like pretty simple GraphQL stuff, right? So it has auto generated all these things. So if you want to create a poll, you don't have to go through all these GraphQL things by yourself, right? It has auto generated for you. You can just call a method from the library we are installing, and pass this GraphQL query, and it will give you the response. Okay, so this is for the mutation. For queries as well, you can see this get poll, list polls, and get poll responses, list poll responses. Okay, and we have this by user as well. We should have called this polls by user. That would make more sense, but yeah, we can replace that if you want. So these are the files it has created, and it is installed as well. So let me show you how we have to hook everything up. We have to create a client now. Okay, so let me just copy this part to make the configuration. So in the main.jsx, let me paste it. So we are getting Amplify. Let's not worry about the generate client for now. So the configuration part is done. You are already familiar with this Amplify configuration, right? So that part is done. Now we have to generate some sort of client. Okay, and this will make sense. Let us just create a client first. So in the lib, let's call it client.js. Okay, and let me copy this. So generate client, and we are just generating a client. So we'll be using this GraphQL client to talk to our backend. Okay, let me export it from here. Perfect. Now to list all the polls, we just have to go to our API directory or API file. Yeah, and right now we're just hard coding this. Let me remove this. Let us bring the client here. So import client from client. Perfect. And there's a method on this client called GraphQL. Let me call that. Okay. And in that GraphQL method, you have to pass different parameters. Okay. The first one is query. So let us actually import all the query. So as queries from this directory, right? So this queries that has auto generated by Amplify. So GraphQL slash queries. All right. Now let me pass that particular query, this by user query. So we want to list all the polls by the user. Okay. And one more thing, if I command click on this by user, it will take me to that particular query. And you can see we have to pass some variables to this by user, and this user ID is mandatory. Okay. And if you want, you can pass this limit, filter, sort direction, these things. Okay. So we have to pass this user ID. So let me copy that. And in the variables, we can pass this user ID. Okay. Now let me store the result in a result variable, and let us pass this user ID as a hard coded value. So let me just pass maybe some random characters. Okay. And inside this result, there will be an object called data. So on that data, there will be another object called this by user. So whatever the query name, under this query name, you will be having, like, if there is a single document, then the single document. But if there are multiple documents on an array of documents, so for this case, this is a list polls, right? So there will be multiple documents. So that will be under items, and I'll be showing you in a moment. So let me give it a save. Let us run our development server. So npm run dev. Perfect. Let us go back and hit refresh. And in the network tab, you can see I'm filtering through fetch or XSR, and you can see there are two GraphQL requests. Two is basically like in the React dev mode and the use effect, it is calling the endpoint twice, right? But in production, it will not do that. So let me select GraphQL, and in the payload, you can see it is sending those variables and the query. And in the response, we are getting this data. Under the data, we are having by user, and inside by user, we are having these items. And for now, it's an empty array. So let us create a new poll. Okay. So to create a new poll, we have to follow the same thing, that is call this client GraphQL. And this time under the query, we have to pass a mutation. So let me bring all the mutations. Perfect. And mutations dot create poll. Now let me command click and see what are the things I have to pass here. So in this case, we have to pass this input. Okay. And input is mandatory. Now we don't know what we have to pass in this input. So to find out that, you just copy this name and go to this Amplify Backend API, and these are the schema we were creating, right? Now you don't have to open this, you have to open this build. Inside this build, there is another schema. Okay, so you have to, so this is the superset of this schema. So Amplify is basically injecting some other types. Okay, so open this and let me search with this create poll input. Okay, so these are the things we have to pass. So ID is not mandatory, because if you're not passing any ID, then ID will be auto generated, and name, user, and options are mandatory. So let me copy this. Perfect. And let me go back to our API, and in the variables, there will be an input, and inside that input, we're passing this. By the way, if you are using TypeScript, then you don't have to manually see like what are the things you have to pass, right? If you are using TypeScript, then like when it is generating these mutations and queries, it will generate the necessary type definitions for you as well. Okay, so on the name is coming from this parameter name. User ID, again, let us just hard code the user ID. We'll be initializing the authentication in a moment. So let us pass this user ID like this. And in the options, we are passing this poll option input. So let me copy that, go back to schema.graphql. Let me search with that. So Yeah, poll option input will be an object with ID and value, and we have to pass an array of this. All right, and whatever options we are having here in this function, the type of that options is similar, so we can just directly pass that options. Perfect. Now let me give it a save. Let me close this. We don't need it. And our development server is running. Let us go back and let's see. Let me open the network tab and let's see if we can create a poll. So first poll, add option, option on, and option 2. Okay, hit create poll. It is sending a GraphQL request. You can see it has created a poll successfully. Okay, now in the UI level it is not showing the spinner because we are not awaiting it, maybe. Yeah, so we have to await it. Let's have a result, and we have to return the result, again the data, and whatever query name we are having or mutation name. Okay, let me give it a save, and let us go back. Let me give it a refresh, and let's create another poll. Second poll, add option 2, hit create poll. Yeah, now you can see it has successfully created a poll, and it is taking me to our poll page, single poll page. Okay, now if I go to the home page, you can see it is listing the poll properly as well. So second poll and first poll. So for this particular user, everything is working properly. Let us now initialize the authentication for our project, right? So to do that, let me just run Amplify, add auth, and for now we are happy with the default configuration. Okay, and we want the user to be logged in with email. It has successfully add the authentication. So let us run Amplify push to push all the changes to the backend. All right, so it has successfully created our authentication. And to add the authentication in our application, you already know we have to go to the authentication, and we already set up the Amplify configuration, right? And now we just have to install these two dependencies, this AWS Amplify UI React and AWS Amplify. So let me do that. So npm install Amplify, AWS Amplify UI React, and AWS Amplify we have already installed. Okay, so let us just install this one. Now from that component we have to bring this with authenticator, right? So let me copy this, and before that we need to import this CSS in our index.js file. So that is main.jsx, I guess. Let me make the configuration here, and we'll be using this with authenticator now. So let us go to the app.jsx. Let me paste it here, and let us just call this with authenticator and pass our app component. Perfect. Let's give it a save, and if I go back to our application now, let's run the local host npm run dev. Perfect, and give it a refresh. Now it should give us the sign in form. So let us quickly create a new account with my personal email address. Again, I'm just using password 123. All right, hit confirm, and we are logged in. Now it is like taking the polls from that hard-coded user, right? Now let us actually change that. So in the api.js, there's a method called get current user, right? Get current user, and that is coming from this AWS Amplify /auth. So we'll be using this function to get the current authenticated user, right? And it will return an object, and inside that there will be a field called user ID, and we'll be bringing this user ID from there. So let me copy that, and let me replace this as well. Okay, let me give it a save. Now it should go away. Yeah, and let us give it a poll for this user. Untitled poll is fine, and these are fine as well. Okay, if I go back to the home, then yeah, we are having this untitled poll. All right, so we have successfully set up the authentication. Now to add the logout functionality, let us go back to our app.jsx. And you already know, if you are calling this with authenticator higher order component, that will basically give you a logout function or sign out function. Okay, why this is not happy? React props thing. Let me turn this off as well. So yes, lint. Perfect. now before calling this React router provider, let us actually pass a div here. So div, and let me just have a header component here. So header, let's add the styling, padding, and bg slat 900 is fine, I guess. And inside that, let's have another div, and this will be a container, max width screen LG. Yeah, that's fine. This will be flex, justify between, and item center, right? And inside this, let us just have our logo called poll app. Let me make it bold, so font bold, and text LG is fine, maybe. Yeah. And finally, let us just have a button, simple button component, and let's call sign out here or log out. Okay, and on click we'll be just passing this sign out function. Okay, let's give it a save, and now we should have a header, so poll app. And if I click on this logout button now, yeah, it is taking me to our login form. So you have successfully added the login functionality. All right, let me log back in, and if I click on a poll now, it is taking me to this dummy page where we're showing this poll ID, right? So now we want to get all the details about this poll, right? So let's see what is the query we're having for that. So in the queries, you can see we have this get poll, right? So inside this get poll, we are having ID, name, user ID, all the options that the poll has, and all the related responses for that poll. Okay, but inside this response, we're just having this next token and type name. Like response should contain what is the option that has selected, who has selected that response, those kind of information we need, right? So we have to basically rebuild this. Okay, rebuild this GraphQL query. So to do that, let me introduce a new tool with you. So let us go back to our AWS console and search for AppSync. And this is the service that Amplify is using under the hood to create our GraphQL API, right? So this is, you can see poll app. You can see it has just taken the app name and the environment, and it has created a new API, AppSync API with that. So you just have to type AppSync and find out the API you are having. Okay. So this is the home page, and from that you have to go to this run a query. Okay. So click on this run a query thing, and you will be having a GraphQL playground. Now, if you already worked with Apple GraphQL, then you are already familiar with this kind of GraphQL setup, right? So this is nothing to do with AWS. This is completely related to GraphQL, right? So from here, we'll be able to publish different query and mutations as well, right? So let me show you. So I have selected this query, and let's list all the polls that we are having currently inside the database, right? So I have selected list polls, and you can select like whatever things you want to see. So let us just get ID, name, and in the options ID and value, and in the response we want to get the response ID. This response ID is basically the option ID. We should rename this, but yeah, for now response ID is fine. And who has given the response, the user ID, right? So if I run this query now, let me change this as well. So list query. So this name is just to identify this query inside this playground. We can have multiple query or mutation, right? That's why. So let us run list query. So currently we're having this query. Okay. So we are having multiple polls. So previously we have created some polls as well. So this is the second poll, first poll, and the untitled poll. Okay. And untitled poll is like after the authentication, we have created this untitled poll, right? And let me get the user ID as well, then it will make sense. So user ID, run the query again. So you can see previously this was that hard-coded user, right? But for this untitled role, we are having that authenticated user. Okay. So from now on, we'll be just focusing on this one. Okay, let's do one thing. Let's delete this two. So we'll be having some exercise in this fashion. Okay. So let me copy this ID. Okay. And let's select mutation, add a new mutation, and we want to delete a poll, right? And to delete the poll, we just have to mention the ID, right? So instead of my mutation, let's just type delete poll. All right, so from the run button, now we have to choose this delete poll. Okay, so it has deleted. Again, list all the polls. We're having this first poll. Let me copy that. Let me replace this. Okay, and run the delete poll again. So now we are left with only this single poll. Okay, untitled poll. We don't need this. We can remove this. And now let us create some responses. So you can see for now this responses items array is empty. Okay, so let us create some responses for this. So we didn't create the UI yet, but from this playground let us make those responses. So to create the response, we have to take a mutation as well. And yeah, create poll response is fine. So let me change the name first. Create poll response. Perfect. And first we have to pass this user ID. So who is making this response? So let's take a random user. So random one. And the response ID. So this should be the options ID basically. So from these options, let's say he is choosing this option 1. Okay, so let me copy the ID and let me pass that. And this poll response ID is basically poll ID. Okay, so let me copy the poll ID as well. Perfect. Now let us create this response and let us just return the ID. Okay, create poll response. It has created. Now if I list the responses, you can see we are having on response here. Okay, let's create another response. So this response is coming from random user 2 maybe, and this will be for this option, second option. Create poll response, list query, and now we're having 2 responses. Let's create another one. So random 3, this time it will be for this response ID. This time it will be for this first option, right? So let me replace that, hit run, create poll response. Perfect, list query. And now we are having 3 responses, 2 for the first one, okay, and 1 for the second one. Now we can actually create our UI for that. So if I open our diagram quickly, let's see what is the plan. So you can see, if as a owner, if I'm viewing this, then there will be the poll name and all the options and the vote that was casted for that option, right? So let's do that. We have a particular page for that, I believe. So in the components directory, we're having this single poll page, right? So first thing first, let me actually copy this part. Let me show you what is the plan. So let me tidy things up a bit. Perfect. So these are the things we want when we want to get a response, right? So GraphQL, inside the GraphQL directory, we already have some auto-generated queries and mutation. Let's add some custom one. So custom.js, and let me copy this get poll one. So get poll, perfect. And let's change that with this. So get poll with response, perfect. And now from these items, let me just copy this part, perfect. And let me paste it here. All right, so now we are having a custom query called get poll with response. Okay, and these are the things we want. Perfect. Now let me open the api.js and let's have a new function. Let me copy this one actually. So that will be get poll. All right, and let us import those customs on. Was it custom? Yeah, custom queries, perfect. And we want to use this, sorry, custom queries dot get poll with response, perfect. And we are expecting an ID. So in the variables, just pass the ID here, and let's have the ID from here. We don't need the user ID here, perfect. So that will be under result data, and this is not an array, so just me copy the name, that is get poll, perfect, get poll. Give it a save and quit out. Let's go back to our single poll.jsx. Now let's have a use effect, okay, and we want to get the poll. So get poll dot, then let me pass the ID here, and before passing the ID, let me check it like this. If no ID, then just return. Okay, so ID, then we'll be having the poll, right? Let me have an state as well. So poll set poll is equal to use state. For now, let's populate with null. Okay. Now here we can just pass this set poll. So once we are having some poll, then this set poll will be called with that poll. All right. Let me pass an empty array here, and let's pass the dependency. Perfect. Now, if no poll, then just return null. And if there is some poll, then let us print the name. Let's see what we get. So poll dot name. Perfect. And yeah, we are getting this untitled poll. So now we just have to work on our styling a bit. So before going into the styling part, let me just show you all the logic first. Okay. And the styling I will be just copy paste. I don't want to bore you showing all the tailored CSS styling part. All right. So now our plan is, if I go back to our diagram, you can see we will be listing all the option name and the vote for that option. And this is the data structure we are getting, by the way. So there will be an ID name in the option array and the responses. Okay. So let's do one thing. Let's have a new function called get options with count, maybe. Yep. And we're expecting a poll. Okay. So let me just type out the code and it should make sense. We want to map over the options array dot map. So we are getting a particular option, and for that particular option we want to check like how many response ID or option ID is present in this response array. Okay. So to do that, let me just have a count like this is equal to, again, poll dot option, not options this time is the response dot items dot filter. So this is the response we're getting. Okay, a single response, and let's call it response is equal to response dot response ID is equal to option dot ID. Okay, so these variable should be called option ID. This does not make any sense, but yeah. So response dot response ID is equal to option dot ID. Perfect. And whatever array we are getting, let me just have the length. Right. And let me return another object by spreading whatever that is coming inside the option and the count. Okay. Let me console log this thing. Let's see what we are getting. So console log, call this function, pass the poll. Perfect. And we are getting tons of arrays. Okay, so we are getting the option ID. Perfect. And the count, you can see for the first option we are having 2, and the second option we are having count 1. Okay, so this is working just fine. So now in this UI you can just use this information to like visually show everything properly. So let me just copy paste some code. This is just for styling. Okay, so I have written some tailwind CSS classes to make things pretty, and you can go over this if you want. So let me remove that as well. So now you can see we are getting this untitled poll and whatever the options and the count for that particular option. So this is the owner part. Like as a owner, if you are logging in, like this should be visible to you. Right, so we have completed this owner facing page, right? Now we have to work on this public facing page as well. So if you are sharing the link with someone like a third party user, so that user will be able to choose any option and submit. Okay. And as an owner, if you're opening the poll, then you can see all the responses and counts and everything. All right. So this is the single poll page. Now in the components directory, let us create a new directory called poll details. Okay, and inside that let's have an admin.jsx. So admin poll details, right? Let's do one thing. Let me copy everything from here and let's paste it here. Okay, instead of single poll, let's call it admin poll details. Perfect. Now we don't want to perform these things. We want the poll as a prop. Perfect. So we do not need this, and rest of the things are fine. So in the single poll page now, we don't need this function, and we are checking if there is no poll, then just returning. And in this single poll, we need the user ID to check like if this poll is coming from the particular user that is logged in or not. Okay, so to get the user, let's have another state, set user ID use stat, and let's make it null for now. And in the use effect, you already familiar with this get current user. Okay, and then we are having this user, and let's call this set user ID and just pass this user dot user ID. Right, now here let us make this check as well, or no user ID, then return null, cause to access this application you need to be logged in. All right, now let us open that custom query, and we are getting the user ID, all right, in the query. So if I go back to the app sync, you can see we are having the user ID. Yeah, so let us access that, and let's write a simple logic. So if poll.user ID is equal to user ID, then we know that this is an admin page, so admin poll details, and let's just pass the poll here. Okay, and if that is not the case, then for now just return public poll details. All right, and we can remove this part. Perfect, let's give it a save, and everything should be working as expected. So if I hit refresh, you can see as I'm the owner, I can see all the responses and everything. Now let us actually create a new account, right? So for that we need a email address, and for the verification code we need the inbox access as well. So let's have a 10-minute email. So this is our new email address. Let me copy this, and let us open the portal here, create a new account. Let's see, are we having the confirmation code or not? So we got the verification code. Let me copy that. Perfect, and let's paste it here. So we have successfully logged in. Okay, now let's see that feature. So let's say this is the owner, and owner will share this link to get the poll, right? So he's sharing the link, and let me just paste the link here, and I can see this public poll details because I'm logged in as a different user, right? So let's now create this public poll details, and to do that, let me go to Shatsian UI, and there's a component called radio group. Let me pick that up. So radio group, and this is the component, and to use this we have to install the form component as well. So let me find the form component. This is the form component. Let's install it first, and let me copy this radio component code as well. So before doing that, we have to install radio component too. So yeah, form is done, and now let us copy the code. Perfect, and inside the poll details, let us create a public one .jsx, and let me paste all the code here. Perfect. So use client, we don't need that. We want to export default, and public poll details. Perfect, we are expecting the poll, and the function to handle poll submit. All right, we don't need this TypeScript feature because we are in a JavaScript environment, and for now they are using this schema. Let me put the schema here as well because we'll be dynamically creating that. So form schema, and let's call it option, and let me dynamically get the schema from the poll. So poll.option.map goes to option.id. So these will be the options, and basically the option value, option name. Okay, and let's change the option from here as well. Perfect, and this is the form label, right? All new message, direct message. Okay, so let me remove this form item. Let me cut it actually, and let me have poll.option.map. I'm having the option here, and let me just return a component like this. Let me pass the key as option.id. Perfect, and value will be like whatever I'm passing here, right, in this enum. So that is also the id, so dot id. Perfect, and in the label we can pass the value. Value means name, like we should have called that name, but yeah, So option dot name. Perfect. And the rest of the things we can delete. Let's give it a save. And there's a toast component here. We don't need that. Perfect. And when you are submitting, we just want to call this function. And this data will contain this option, right? And whatever option ID he is selecting. So let us just pass the data dot option. Okay, so we'll be getting the option ID. Now let me go to the single poll, and instead of this, let us actually pass public option, public poll details. Perfect. Let me pass the poll here, and handle poll submit. Let me create a function, and I will be getting the option ID here. Perfect. And let's log this thing for now. So option ID. Right, let's give it a save. And this is the public facing one. Hit refresh, and something is not working, I guess. So this is the poll. Yeah, it should work. For the owner side, is it working? Yeah, for the owner side it's working. So all right, so this is the error. We are passing option here, but it should be options. Okay, same for this one, options. Perfect. Let's give it a save, hit refresh. Yeah, now we are getting this thing. So let me remove this name with poll.name and untitled poll. That's fine. Let me work on the visual part as well. Let's have a div. Okay, inside this div we'll be having that, and this should be a container. Max with screen same is fine, and margin top 20. Perfect. And for some reason, okay, this would be value. Perfect. So now you can see we are getting untitled option 1, untitled option 2. So if I choose one and hit submit, I'm getting that particular ID. Okay, if I choose one and hit this, I'm getting other ID. And if I do not choose anything and hit submit, then it is asking me you need to select a notification type. Not notification type, you need to select an option. All right, so our public facing one is ready as well. Now in this test poll, we are having, for the option 1, we are having 2 votes, and for option 2, we are having a single vote, right? Now let us try to cast a vote for option 1. All right, so this is the user, public user. So this link is shared with this user, and we want to cast a vote, right? So we'll be selecting that and submitting that. So to do that, what we have to do is, in the mutation, you can see there's a mutation called create poll response, right? So we'll be using this. So let us go back to the API one, and let me copy this one, create poll. Okay, so this should be create poll response. Perfect. And we are expecting the option ID that he has selected, and the poll ID. Perfect. And to do that, we need the user ID, obviously. Let me select create poll response. Okay, and let me command click. Let's see what are the things we need. And we need an input of create poll response input. So let me copy this. Let me go to that build one. Okay, GraphQL build one, and let me search for that. Let's see. So these are the things we have to pass. So let me copy this, close this out, and response ID is basically the option ID. Okay, and user ID, that's coming from here, and poll response ID is basically the poll ID. And in the result data, we will be having an object called create poll response. We'll be having all the things here. All right, that's kind of good. And now in our public.jsx, when we're submitting the form, let me edit it, and let me make this function async as well. And in the button, let us disable the button when the form is getting submitted. So form.formState.is submitting, is submitting. Okay, and we want to show the loading spinner as well. We can grab the loading spinner from this home page. No, not the home page. In the create poll page, we should have a loading spinner. Yeah, so let me copy that, and this should be for this, and let me bring that as well. Let's call it submit. Right, so that is done. And now in the single poll where we are handling this poll submit, we just have to call that API. So this will be an async function as well. So await create poll response, and we are expecting option ID that is coming from here, and poll ID is poll.id. All right, that's kind of good. And now let's give it as refresh. Everything's working. So this is the public side, and in the owner side we are having 2:1. Okay, so let us cast a vote for option number 1. So let me select option number 1, hit submit. Okay, we have casted the vote. Now we have to show some UI here that your vote has been casted or something like that. So yeah, let's give it a refresh. So you can see we have successfully casted a vote for option number 1. All right, now I have already casted a vote for option number 1. Still it is showing me like if I submit again, I will be submitting another vote from that user. Okay, and that should not be the case. So when you have already casted a vote, we should show some UI to block that. All right, so to do that, let us have a new UI called admin done, maybe not admin done, public done .jsx, and public done. Let me have the class name. Let's make it a container, and max width screen small and empty 20, and let's have a h1. You have, why this is not happy? There are so many rules nowadays. Okay, you have already submitted. I'm very bad with spelling, by the way. Yeah, you have already submitted your response for this. Perfect. Let's increase the font size a bit as well. So class name text to Excel maybe is fine. All right, now in the single poll, before showing the public poll details, we can actually check. The check will be if poll.response.items. Okay, so we are getting all the response array. .find, we are finding. So this is a JavaScript method you already know. So finding, inside the response we are finding if response.user ID equal to user ID. So basically this user ID we are getting from like whoever is logged in, and we are checking if that user ID is present inside the response or not. So if I open the schema, that will make sense. So this is the schema. You can see in the poll response we'll be having a user ID, right? So we'll be having an array, right? This array, and inside that array we are finding out that that user has already submitted his response or not. Okay, let's return the public, not public done, let's call it public done poll details. Okay, perfect. Let's give it a save, and now you have already submitted your response for this. And if I create any other account, then I will be able to cast my vote again. Okay, all right, so that's all about this video. If you have any further question, please let me know, and I will see you in the next one. Thanks.